Hello and welcome. I'm Maria Ressa, and this is Rappler Talk Business. In the studio with me is the President and CEO of AboitizPower, Danel Aboitiz. Danel, thank you so much for coming to Rappler.
Thank you for having me, Maria. Thank you.
Well, look, power is critical for development. And one of the things that I've realized, let me pull you out to the context of it. You're leading this company now in the most crucial of times, very uncertain, open wars, Ukraine, Gaza, those hidden wars in Sudan. You have Bashir al-Assad just taking off from Syria. And then we had pegged 2024 as a tipping point year for democracy. We have the far right growing, and now many of the people we've elected, illiberal leaders, many of them, walking into office next year. With all of this around the world, a fragile supply chain, I want to know what, if anything, keeps you up at night?
I suppose the concentration of risk, understanding the fragility of the supply chain, and accepting that there are many factors outside of our control. I'm a little uncomfortable with our concentration in certain areas, but we are of course addressing that swiftly. So in the case of AboitizPower, we're highly concentrated in the Philippines, and we're highly concentrated in coal to power. So we're addressing that by beginning to look for opportunities internationally and building out our renewable portfolio and continuing to try to expand our distribution business.
Fantastic. I guess, I had just gotten back from South Africa, where they have this euphemism for blackouts. They call it load balancing.
Indeed.
Sorry, load balancing, right? But the blackouts are longer than it was during Ramos's time. And fragility, 60% of the youth are unemployed. When I look at countries all around the world, how would you place the Philippines in terms of where we are both in power and in terms of development?
It's interesting that you mentioned South Africa. The state utility, Eskom, was a very well-regarded utility. They have a lot of excellent talent that's actually fled South Africa. Many of them are working with us here in AboitizPower.
Yes.
And South Africa has actually an excess of generating capacity. They have much more capacity than demand. However, the reliability of their coal fleet is so low that they are encountering all these issues. So in that context, I think the Philippines is way ahead.
I was actually surprised, both even economically and mood-wise, right? Like, it feels like the Philippines is in a different place. Aboitiz is the second top energy company in the Philippines. How do you become number one? What are the challenges you particularly face?
It's all right. I'd rather not be number one. That's a difficult place to be.
Yes.
No, in all seriousness, in the different aspects of the industry, we are either in the first or second position. I actually welcome, a diverse industry with many medium-sized players. I think it makes for a much more stable energy industry. Having one very large dominant player, I think is riddled with negative externalities. So I'm quite happy with the multiplayer playing field that we have in the Philippines, and I think it lends itself well to the needs of the country.
And it seems like Aboitiz has been focused on this. This didn't happen, overnight to get you here. The Philippine government itself says it's committed to transitioning our power mix from, I think it's 58% coal today to 35% renewable energy by 2030, 60% by 2040. Is this realistic? How do you get there?
So there are different scenarios in the Philippine Energy Plan. The scenario you're referring to is the most aggressive scenario.
Okay. Aggressive.
Oh, I mean, there's there are like clean energy scenarios.
Agreed.
So I would say that's the bull case,
okay,
if you will. And being a bull case, it's a reach. I think the base case scenarios are achievable. The government has put in place a number of mechanisms. You have the enabling law, which is the renewable portfolio standards. They've launched the green energy auction program. They've just issued the bulletin for the third round of the green energy auction, and they're imminently launching the renewable energy market. So all the enabling mechanisms are being put in place. You've also recently seen the natural gas bill that will kind of facilitate upstream natural gas production, make its way through both the House and the Senate. So I think you'll see a diverse sources of energy come into play.
So
I think you'll see gas take a little bit more of the share. You'll see increased penetration of renewable energy, and with the third round of the green energy auction program, which is aimed at pump hydro, we will build the necessary storage to allow for more variable renewable energy.
Bit by bit, you're happy with. Well, I asked you the first time, what keeps you up at night. What does keep you up when you're going after aggressive targets like this?
So, both from an AboitizPower perspective, but also from a national perspective, the same answer: concentration of risk. So I think one of the challenges with a high penetration of coal as a baseload source, particularly in our case where we import most of that coal from a different country, is the concentration of risk. It is the cheapest source of electricity for the Philippines at the moment. So it certainly has a place in our grid, and I think we shouldn't ignore that option. I think it's certainly something that has a place in our generation mix, but some diversity I think will do as well.
When you say diversity,
diversity of sources
of
electricity.
Right. Creating the electricity connects to the moving that and bringing it elsewhere. And let me bring you back to geopolitical power. Our transmission lines can be controlled by China, right? Do you worry about things like this?
I don't. In the context of the Philippines, our transmission system is actually not very automated. Our substations are manned. Our transmission system is such that if we had to control it manually, we would be able to do that. So I'm not too concerned about the threat, the kind of cybersecurity threats associated with State Grid's ownership in NGCP. I think actually our transmission challenges are much more local. We need to build out the transmission network. It's operating close to capacity.
Right.
And I think we all need to come together to help accelerate the build out of this network.
Is that happening?
I think so. I think the industry is quite united. I think there's a common view around the need for transmission and a common desire to help each other and get this moving. And you've seen some positive outcomes, right?
Yes.
You see the 500 kV backbone being built from Bataan all the way down to Quezon.
Yeah.
That's recently been energized. Cebu Negros Panay has been energized.
Right.
Mindanao to Cebu interconnection has been recently energized. So you're seeing forward movement.
I remember. Of course, I remember the Fidel Ramos years when we had these extreme blackouts, or euphemistically our brownouts, right? Like we're beyond that, but yet we still have shortage of power, right? And what you talked about now, you just had the ability to shift, to bring power from different parts of the Philippines to others. How difficult is it right now? How much of our energy supplies are we meeting, and how much more do we have to accelerate to meet future demands?
We are meeting our energy needs.
Okay.
We need approximately 700 megawatts of additional capacity a year to maintain this demand-supply balance, this reserve margin, if you will. And we are seeing new capacity come online. You've got perhaps 1.5 gigawatts of capacity coming online next year.
Great.
So double what we expect growth to be. And the spot market prices are showing that.
Oh, great.
So spot market prices really are your indicator of
Right.
of supply tightness.
Yeah.
And you're seeing the spot market come down.
You're happy with this Apira, this WISM. You're happy with this kind of system. It's working.
Overall, I think if we take an objective view, it's working. It's not perfect, but it's working.
Power has also been, or the price of electricity has been politically volatile. Let's talk. How about political uncertainty as we move forward? I mean, we talked briefly about how energy requires upfront investment, and then you need time. But how can you have that if there's so much uncertainty in terms of political transitions, leadership, levels of corruption? How do you think about this?
As a power company, I think we have to be very attuned to the needs of the nation.
Yeah.
And really, try to think this through very objectively. What do our consumers really want? And I think if we serve their needs and we solve problems, we can largely insulate ourselves from these kind of political upsets. So we keep our head down. We try to solve problems. We try to provide in the view of AboitizPower. Our view is that we need to provide reliable and cost-effective or affordable electricity. And I think if we keep doing that and we remain true to our mission, we'll be fine.
Fantastic. You seem very calm. Take it a step at a time, right? You're also the next generation leadership, right? Like this is fascinating to me because this generation of leaders are coming of age at such a volatile time. You're an interesting mix of East and West, a philosophy major, someone who studied Chinese. What parts of Danel walks into this developed industry that's crucial for the development of this country? What parts of you are most important that have helped you transition into this and walk forward?
I don't think it's that complicated. I lean on the kind of time-tested values of just hard work, being reliable, showing up, not letting up, trying to perhaps understand the context in which we operate, and understanding who your real stakeholders are. In the case of an energy company, there are many. And I've found that, if we keep in mind the welfare of the community, the needs of our customers, if we take a wide view and understand the needs of all our stakeholders and come up with a balanced solution, we've actually found that there's a lot of support for this industry.
It's super needed. There is, right? But in terms of what makes you different as a leader, what do you think you bring to the table?
Nothing.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Knowing China.
Nothing.
Except hard work.
Except, well, I suppose anybody who has is given the honor of having this kind of responsibility for assets of national interest and responsibility over the livelihoods of so many. I would imagine that anybody who is in these shoes would not get here if they didn't take things seriously, and if they were not trusted to be competent, trusted to be reliable, and trusted to genuinely care for the welfare of their stakeholders. Right?
How do you think the Philippines has changed, though, or the generation? You would be a millennial, right? The tail end. You're the beginning part.
Technically not.
No. Oh, so.
Millennials are 1982, right?
Yes. So you're just.
So I'm clinging on to my 1981. Thank you very much.
But how would you describe this country today, this generation of leaders? What makes, you're a little younger than that, what makes this generation of leaders different?
Gosh, I've never considered that.
Do you see generational gaps, say, between the older folks and now, or?
I suppose there's some increased transparency, more access to information.
Right.
I think, naturally that makes people more curious and therefore more demanding and better informed. But those are not bad traits.
No, not at all. Not at all. Technology. I mean, I would say that's one of the key parts,
Indeed.
For Rappler in particular. What role is technology playing in your industry today?
A few things. In the case of AboitizPower, there are two particular areas where we are using technology or relying on technology quite heavily. The first is predictive maintenance.
Oh yeah.
So we are trying to increase the utility of our assets.
Is that literally load balancing or no? Not really.
So it's if you imagine your car,
Yeah.
the manufacturer would tell you change your oil every 10,000 kilometers,
Yeah.
and you just follow that. But in actual fact, depending on your driving style, how you use your car,
Right.
the conditions where you operate that vehicle, you may actually be able to run it longer or shorter. And if you had the technology necessary to tell you what condition your equipment was in, you could then stretch that out to 11, 12,000 kilometers. So that's what we're doing with power stations. Instead of, say, doing a general overhaul every 12 months,
Right.
we're trying to increase the time between overhauls without compromising reliability.
Fantastic.
And as a result, you basically have effectively, you're increasing your ability to produce electricity. So you're adding supply into the system.
How quickly can you adopt this? Because technology changes so fast, right? How quickly are you able to evolve your business?
So in the power business, technology hasn't changed that much. I mean, you're seeing distributed energy generation is a very interesting space. But the core of the power system, poles and wires remain in place. The efficiency of hydroelectric plants hasn't changed significantly in the last 100 years.
Wow.
There are other areas where,
Yeah.
Batteries are getting cheaper, solar panels are getting cheaper.
Yeah.
The efficiency of gas turbines are improving. The emissions of coal plants are improving. And in those areas, we keep up by simply installing the best available technology. Sometimes you can retrofit old technology, but trying to stay ahead of the curve by keeping our costs down and maximizing efficiency.
Fantastic. What blockers, what would you like to see happen that isn't happening? What would help significantly?
If I could ask for one thing, it would be a long-term plan.
Huh. Yes, we all want that.
A stable and well-conceived Philippine energy plan that is handed over from one administration to the next.
Yeah.
Obviously, with more certainty, we can make longer-term bets.
Yes.
And make more efficient decisions, efficient allocations of capital.
This is where I get jealous of a country like Singapore, which has decade-long plans that they shift on and off, right?
And they make gradual adjustments.
Yes. Do you see us getting to a point where the political upheavals will allow us to have a long-term energy plan?
So we kind of do.
Yeah.
I would say we're in kind of the middle of the road. There's area for improvement, but we're not. I wouldn't say the Philippine energy plan has been in a state of upheaval. I wouldn't go that far.
Yeah. It actually did stabilize as we went crazier politically. Let me ask you, what does the public need to know that they don't know about the way electricity gets to them?
That we have multiple objectives, and that those objectives can sometimes be mutually exclusive. I suspect if the general public understood the trade-offs, we would be more focused on energy affordability, and to some extent energy security, and perhaps less focused on decarbonization.
Interesting. Even though climate change really has an impact on the Philippines, you would say, why? Why would you say that?
Well, you're right. Climate change does have an impact on the Philippines. Yeah. So we're a very small contributor to global greenhouse emissions.
Yes.
But one of the most affected by climate change. So I think it is easy to make the leap that because we're the most affected, we should take a proactive stance. I think if the general public understood that we're in no position to make a material change, and that our national endowment is such that attempting to contribute to reduction in greenhouse gas emissions in the Philippines is very inefficient, very expensive. Perhaps they would take a more global view, and take a more efficient path towards global decarbonization.
Meaning countries that can absorb that should be the ones up front?
So there's that argument,
Okay.
countries that can afford it.
Yeah.
But what I was trying to say is that there are countries that are better positioned to do it. So countries with a mountainous topography can easily build impounding hydro. Countries with abundant flat land and high solar irradiation can easily and get more out of building solar. The Philippines being, an archipelago and a densely populated one is just not well positioned to do that. So perhaps the Philippines is a place where we should focus on energy affordability and attempting to accelerate the evolution of the Philippines from a developing economy to a middle income economy.
Is this something that you're seeing reflected in government plans now?
It's part of the debate.
Yeah.
But obviously there are different points of view.
Right.
And I think there are legitimate concerns around energy security, a desire to increase our self-sustainability. And renewables lends itself to that. I would also say that upstream natural gas production lends itself to that, or domestic coal mining would also lend itself to that.
What can we expect from AboitizPower in the coming months?
So as I mentioned earlier, I'm a little concerned about the concentration of risk. So we are very aggressively building out a renewable pipeline. And about 70+% of our allocated capital expenditures for 2025 will be dedicated to building out our renewables pipeline. So you'll see, solar plants coming online, wind farms coming online. We're looking forward to the privatization of Kalayaan Pump Hydro, which I think can play a critical role in our portfolio.
So it's interesting. You're actually, even though we still rely on coal, and you think that we should be more efficient in terms of cost.
As a nation.
As a nation, you're also pushing forward with renewable
Absolutely.
energy too.
Absolutely.
That's interesting. That's interesting.
I know that sounds contradictory, but it's actually...
No, I understand. I think it's great management. I mean, in that sense, right? Like, how do you balance? How do you know the balance when to push forward and to demand that we deal with what we have and the realities that we have? Pragmatism and idealism, I think, is my question.
So I suppose the way I would frame that question in my mind is, when designing our generation mix to what extent do we use cost optimization in today's terms to drive our decision making, and to what extent do we say invest in the future,
Yes.
and perhaps accept a slight increase in the cost of electricity in order to develop upstream natural gas, impounding hydro, pump storage. Fortunately, that's not a question I have to answer. It's a difficult one.
But that's the balancing act we have,
that's the
right?
balancing
That's the
act we have.
balancing act of the world. In terms of you, and again, I go back to you're coming in to take the helm, this new generation of leaders coming in. In the Philippines in particular, I find organizations shape themselves around the leaders. Like, what do you think, what parts of you will determine what Aboitiz is going to become?
So I've worked in AboitizPower for a decade and a half. And fortunately, I've been given an opportunity to shape, what AboitizPower looks like, even under the leadership of my predecessor. So we kind of co-created this vision. So I don't expect too many changes.
Very modest. Really, that's interesting.
No, we've got. I think we have a clear vision. I'm blessed with a very experienced board and an excellent management team, and one that I've had a hand in shaping. And now we just got to go do what we got to do. I think there are many small improvements to make that will add up, hopefully, to something meaningful. But there's no magic wand or no major change.
And that's where you do this on a daily basis, right? I want to throw one last threat question in before we wrap up. I mean, the world is looking at what China is going to do in response to, it feels like there's levels of impunity all around the world, right? Very strong men testing rule of law. And that's our challenge. The Philippines, South China Sea, or what we call the West Philippine Sea, is one of those places. You are one of the key companies that are there. How do you look at China today?
Well, fortunately, this doesn't seem to spill over very much into the energy sector or into the business sector, for that matter.
Interesting.
So we just kind of maintain a separation.
Do you mean that you've already weighted that risk in when it doesn't, or?
I mean that while we are having a disagreement with our largest neighbor, and these tensions in the West Philippine Sea, and at some point, even at the limits of peaceful coexistence, the energy sector doesn't seem to have been affected. We're still in contact with our key suppliers in China.
Right.
We don't discuss this subject. They supply us what we need, and we continue to do business. So commerce seems to be generally unaffected, and I think that separation is good for us, good for the Philippines.
Fingers crossed, right?
I suppose what we have done is keep an eye on alternatives. So if that supply chain becomes unavailable to us, we are prepared to source the equipment we need elsewhere. We've been keeping an eye on India, interestingly enough.
Yes.
Very cost effective, English speaking.
Yeah. One of the things India did is actually build a tech stack, a public tech stack, which I hope the Philippines at some point does. I mean, let's close with your vision of, where do you want to see our country? Where do you see it going?
Well, I hope this energy industry can come together and support our shift towards becoming a middle-income country. Hopefully, we can pull the 17 million people that are below, or some of them that are below the poverty line, up in front of it, and hopefully, we're able to provide reliable and affordable enough electricity to start to attract some of the foreign investment that seems to be going to our neighbors at the moment.
Wait and see, right? I always joke that the Philippines went from hell to purgatory. We're in purgatory. I mean, do you see more foreign direct investments coming in now? High power cost is one of the, in the old days, this would be a deterrent, right?
I agree. It's certainly one of the things we have to address. And there are many ways of addressing that. You either do it nationally, or we could create kind of microcosms that allow for, and we've done that, right? That's what PEZA zones are.
Right.
So we actually do try to supply that is a customer that we pursue.
Right. Right. Fantastic. Last thoughts. I mean, again, it'll be interesting to see the next decade or so of your leadership. But as you walk in, your last thoughts.
Thank you for having me. I don't know what to say.
No. I think you've been very modest, but thank you. Thank you so much. And, knock on. There's no wood around right now, but let's hope for better days ahead.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right.
Guys, you've been listening to Danel Aboitiz, AboitizPower. I'm Maria Ressa. Thank you for joining us.